Hey YouTube, I want to do an author profile for you on one of my favorite authors, and his name is Augusten Burroughs. And you may recognize his name from a book that was kind of really popular in the mid-2000s called Running with Scissors, but he has a couple other books that I've read and I've enjoyed, so I wanted to talk about all of the ones that I've read and which ones I liked, which ones I didn't, and just give you guys a little insight into my library and what I like to read. I first discovered him when I was in high school from one of my friends who was reading one of his books, and they can get a little racy and a little vulgar, and the book was pretty crazy. It was his big hit book that kind of opened a lot of people's eyes to his work and whatever, but she was reading a part and it was about we were like laughing, like, this is like a porno book, like what are you reading? And we were laughing about it, and then finally I was like, okay, I'll read this book too and see what it's all about, and I'm so happy that I did. I take back any making fun of I made of the book initially because it's excellent and it's one of my favorite books. So the first book that Augusten Burroughs wrote is Sellevision, and this is actually his only novel. This is the only work of fiction that he has. And this one was hilarious. It was about this guy that worked at like Sellevision, so it's kind of like a QVC thing, who ends up exposing himself on air, and there's just so many shenanigans that happen in his books that are just so crazy. I can't describe them all, and I can't even remember them all either because it's been a while since I read this book, but I remember that when I read this, I absolutely loved it. I was cracking up and trying to get everybody that I knew to read it. It wasn't the first one from him that I read. I had read this next book called Running with Scissors first, but I definitely recommend that this is one that you would pick up and read from him, because you might find that if you don't like the memoir style or short essays, that you might actually enjoy his work of fiction. So I highly recommend Sellevision from Augusten Burroughs. It's one of my favorites of his. And the next book he wrote is Running with Scissors. This was the one that became really popular when I was like a junior or senior in high school, and it was on the New York Times bestseller list, and this is a memoir of his childhood. He had a very, very interesting home life growing up, and he just recounts his just insane life. And he kind of has a David Sedaris-esque way about him. He has this very funny humor, it's very quirky, and just these crazy scenarios. So if you are somebody who enjoys David Sedaris, I really think that you would enjoy Augusten Burroughs as well. I will just read you the back because I think that that's the best way to explain what this book is about, and it's something that caught my eye when I read it. Running with Scissors is the true story of a boy whose mother, a poet with delusions of Anne Sexton, gave him away to be raised by her unorthodox psychiatrist who bore a striking resemblance to Santa Claus. So at the age of 12, Burroughs found himself amidst Victorian squalor, living with the doctor's bizarre family, and befriending a pedophile who resided in the backyard shed. The story of an outlaw childhood where rules were unheard of and the Christmas tree stayed up all year round, where Valium was consumed like candy, and if things got dull, an electroshock therapy machine could provide entertainment. The funny, harrowing, and best-selling account of an ordinary boy's survival under the most extraordinary circumstances. And this book was made into a movie. You might recognize that, but obviously the movie sucks in comparison to the book because that's always the case. So definitely check out Running with Scissors. I would say that if you are going to check out Augusten Burroughs at all, you would read Running with Scissors first, and if you really enjoyed it, you would read Sellevision, and then maybe you would read the rest of them. The next book from him that I read was Dry, and this is his account of his time working in advertising and his severe alcoholism. And once again, it is a bunch of short stories from his life. I find them to be really entertaining, even though it's about a deep subject, you know, alcoholism and the seriousness of addiction. It was still really emotional, but at the same time it was humorous. I really enjoy his writing style, and I would recommend Dry as well. I liked it a lot. And the next book that I read from him was called Magical Thinking, and I remember liking this one, but it wasn't, you know, outstanding. It didn't really stand out to me as much as the other ones have. Magical Thinking wasn't one that I thought was, you know, stellar, sensational. I wouldn't say run out and buy it, but definitely if it's something that you decide that you like the author and you really enjoy what he writes, that this would be a must read, I guess, because you're gonna read his whole canon. The next book of his I read when I was in college. This came out right after I discovered him as an author, so I was really, really amped on Augusten Burroughs. I wanted to read anything and everything by him, so when this came out I was super excited. I'd already gone through everything else up to that point and I wanted to read this one. And I really enjoyed this. Just here's like a glimpse. It says, from nicotine gum addiction to lesbian personal ads to incontinent dogs, possible side effects mines Burroughs' life in a series of uproariously funny essays. These are stories that are uniquely Augustan with all the overtop hilarity of Running with Scissors, the erudition of Dry, and the breadth of Magical Thinking. A collection that is universal in its appeal and unabashedly intimate. Possible Side Effects continues to explore that which is most personal, mirthful, disturbing, and cherished with unmatched audacity. A cautionary tale in essay form. Be forewarned. Hilarious, troubling, and shocking results might occur. I enjoyed this one a lot. I would say that of all of his books, this is probably like my third favorite if I had to rank them. Running with Scissors being the first, Sellevision being the second, and Possible Side Effects being the third. Or maybe it's tied with Dry. I'll say Dry is fourth, Magical Thinking fifth, and then this last book from him I'd probably say is the least favorite one that I've read from him, and this is called A Wolf at the Table, and this is a memoir of his father. So he had a very estranged, bad relationship with his father, and this is kind of just recounting his childhood and different interactions that he had with him, and it was very deep, and what I loved about him more so was the quirkiness and the comicalness and the hilarity of some of his other works. So I wasn't a fan of this one as much because it just, you know, lacked more of the comedy that I was looking for from him, and it was okay. Maybe if you have daddy issues you'll like this, I don't know, but it was alright. Of all of his books, this is probably the one that I would recommend the least, but once again, if you decide you love him, go through the whole canon and figure out what you like and what you don't like. And he also wrote some other books. I believe there was like a short essay collection, and there was another thing that came out most recently. I haven't read those yet. There's 2 books I think that I haven't read, and he also wrote the foreword for his brother's book about living with Asperger's, which was interesting because he does talk about his brother a little bit in some of the books. Augusten Burroughs is one of my favorite authors. He is very similar to David Sedaris, as I said, so if you are somebody who enjoys David Sedaris, I highly recommend that you check out Augusten Burroughs, and if you love him and you have read some of his newer books and they're, you know, must-reads, if they're like a return to Running with Scissors-esque writing and not so much like A Wolf at the Table, let me know, because if so, then I am driving to the nearest, not Borders because those all closed, Barnes & Noble, and I'll pick it up and read it immediately because I just think he's hilarious. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a good day. Bye.